Welcome to episode 1 of Saying Something Sober, the podcast where I decide the topic and it could be literally anything. Today's topic, Drag Race UK Season 5. So I suppose some context is in order, really. Well, Drag Race is a big comfort show for me. I started watching when I was 15 with season 6, and back then I was watching it on YouTube, and people would upload the episodes and they'd disappear maybe a month later, but you could typically get the whole season within the month that they were up, and they would often have these kind of weird borders around them, I guess to try and catch out the copyright. But I fell in love with it, and it was kind of my guilty pleasure because I was so in the closet and so ashamed. But this kind of queer celebratory show was something that I loved, and the glitz, the glam, the comedy was great. When it came to the UK, I was obviously super excited, and now here we are with kind of Drag Race UK Season 5, which is crazy because obviously I started watching the US Season 6, and then I watched Season 5, and then Season 7 aired, so I watched that as it came out, and the rest is history, really. But Season 5 of UK was really good, actually. It's probably the second best season of the UK one that we've had. I feel like people will agree with that, but I don't know. I really liked it. There were a lot of lovable queens that I felt went home far too soon, but that's always the marker of a good season, I think, when shocking eliminations happen. I think with Season 4 and kind of Season 3 of UK, there is an element of both of them that is predictable. Now, I love drag and I love the queens, and I love most, if not all, seasons of Drag Race that I watch. I enjoy them in some aspects. So this is in no way a critique of the queens themselves or their talent. It's more their talent in relation to the competition, which is actually a reference to Dragula, which is kind of the spooky version of Drag Race. If you haven't watched it, check it out. It's very entertaining. But with Drag Race UK Season 5, I think it did really well to have people go far that was unexpected, but also understandable. I think there were so many queens that I underestimated early on from the kind of first episode and from the Meet the Queens and the promotional material that I was watching. Even the winner, which, by the way, spoilers ahead for this podcast. If you haven't seen Drag Race UK Season 5, I will be talking in detail about the eliminations, so don't listen if you've not watched it, which I feel like is pretty understandable. It's kind of a given. Anyway, I'm going to start with the elimination order. So I had planned to play a game with one of my flatmates, a Drag Race fantasy league, if you will, where essentially we note down our predicted elimination order and you get points for how close or if you get them right or wrong. And I did quite bad. You'll see, but I'll go in the order that I thought they were going to get eliminated, and I'll say who actually got eliminated and my thoughts. So, starting with the first eliminated queen, I had noted down from the Meet the Queens that I thought going home first was Tamara Thomas, who obviously went on to be in the final 3. The queen that actually went home was Alexis St. Pete, the Polish queen, who was quite endearing in her 2 episodes run. But Tamara Thomas, I thought from the Meet the Queens and from the promotional material that she was kind of one of those sexy queens who might not really fully understand who they were yet. I was obviously 100% wrong. Tamara Thomas knows exactly who she is, and that is what is great about her, and that's really what got her to the final. She was so naturally funny, and it's because she's so comfortable in just being herself, and being herself is actually hilarious person. She's not like necessarily a comedian. We saw the roast, like she did well, but it was kind of she did well because it was so crazy. But she's kind of funny just naturally. She's just kind of one of those humorous people that just has a good energy. Alexis St. Pete, I could sense that she was kind of at least new to the game as a drag queen, so I did have her penned as an early out. I didn't necessarily think she'd be the first to go because she kind of struck me as someone that potentially had really good lip sync ability and would be kind of a lip sync assassin in the first few episodes. I was wrong about that, although we only saw her lip sync once, so maybe I was right and we just didn't get to see it. But moving on to the second eliminated queen. This one I actually got right. So Miss Naomi Carter, I had her noted down as a second out. Now, she was very endearing. I mean, that Doncaster accent is just music to my ears, really. I think she came across to me, at least from the Meet the Queens, as kind of a baby queen or like new to the game. But I know in the show they mentioned that she, had been doing it for a while, and so I guess maybe that energy was more just that's something I was picking up from her confidence, which I think we saw in the show. She kind of lost her kind of pizzazz when she hit her knee, and that kind of hindered her a little bit. But she was so lovable, and I was actually really sad to see her go. That lip sync was good, and I was kind of shocked to see Caramel in the bottom so early. So it was a good episode. The third eliminated queen I had noted down was Alexis St. Pete. So in my head, I was picturing how I expected all the queens to go, and I thought, okay, she's gonna have lip synced episode 1. She might escape lip sync episode 2, but maybe she did as well. Then she'll be going into her next lip sync, and people will be thinking she's a lip sync assassin, but she's kind of trying to get through these early challenges. I think the hardest part about predicting who's going to go home when is not knowing the structure of the challenges. For example, Alexis St. Pete went home first because it was a design challenge and she wasn't necessarily design minded or design gifted. But had it been a girl group challenge or a dancing challenge, maybe she would have done better because she strikes me as somebody who when she performs can flip, dip, all of that. But fourth out, and this one is actually kind of sinful that I did this, but fourth out I had Michael Marouli. Obviously, love Michael Marouli, went to the end, and such a kind queen with really good runways. I think that she was probably the runway queen of the season. There were some really good ones from Tamara Thomas and from Banksy, but I think Michael consistently delivered a new angle each week. But fourth out, I think in my head, I was thinking she is going to get the narrative of too similar to Vivian, because that was the energy I was getting from the Meet the Queens, is that she's this northern kind of old school queen who spends a lot of time in Gran Canaria, and that's where she's kind of honed her craft. And she's funny and she can do a runway, but I feel like in my head I was like, oh, they're going to spin this narrative that she's too similar to the Vivian, which she's very much her own queen, and she went on to do very well. In fact, I kind of got the sense maybe that she was going to win, but I'll get onto that. So who went home that episode was, I can't remember. It was Vicky. Obviously it was Vicky. And I forgot to mention that Banksy went home third, whereas I thought it was Alexis, and that was the biggest gag for me. Honestly, Banksy was one of my favourites, and I was so shocked. And then it was followed up by Vicky, and again, so shocking. She had won the first challenge. Like, I think in the 4 seasons of UK before this, there's only been one queen to not reach the final if they won the first challenge, and I think that was Estina Mandela. So really, honestly shocking, but Snatch Game is a tough challenge, and she really did fall, so it was kind of expected. But in my elimination order, I had Michael Marouli going home when I thought Vicky went home, and then after that, I had Vicky going home. So I kind of got the sense, maybe from the Meet the Queens, that she was more of an older school queen, and I felt that queens that I had listed as going further might kind of outshine her. I was obviously close to when she actually got eliminated, but I think I was so wrong with what the narrative was because she really, really dominated those first few episodes that she was in. I think ultimately it's a case of she did really, 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 really well. There's only one place to go, which is down when you do badly, and she did badly in the snatch game, so she went down. And she was obviously up against Dee Dee, who was the lip sync assassin of the season. I then, speaking of her, I had Dee Dee going home after Vicky. I knew Dee Dee before the season because of Crystal Versace's Drag Family and the Wow Presents show that they'd done together. So I kind of felt that she had this reputation that would probably precede her and like lead her to go on a little bit further. But I did get the sense she is younger, and there were some other queens that I felt were more, I don't know, had been around longer. But she did really, really well, and I think we always like to brand the villain of the season, and she wasn't at all the villain of the season. I'm not really sure there was one this season, maybe Vicky, but only after she got eliminated, I think. But Dee Dee was quite endearing, you know, she just kept fighting, lip syncing. But after Dee Dee, I had Kate Butch going home right before the finale. So weirdly, I had Dee Dee and Kate switched. So I thought Dee Dee was going to go home when Kate went home, and Kate was going to go home when Dee Dee went home. I thought Kate was really funny in all of the promotional material, but there was something, just something, like a lack of confidence maybe that I was picking up that I thought maybe wouldn't get her to that finale. And again, so wrong about the narrative. I get the UK and the US one mixed up, but the UK one doesn't seem to have as much of a narrative pushing thing. Kate was so funny, and I think probably the fan favorite of the season. People really loved her, and I'm so glad she actually got a win because the constant save was so frustrating. And then she finally got her win. She did go home the next episode, but hey ho, she got her win. Then my top three was Ginger Johnson, Caramel, and Banksy. Obviously, I only got one of those right. Banksy and Caramel had both gone home earlier, which was shocking, really. I thought Banksy was kind of shoo-in for the finale. I really thought she was potential winner vibes. Caramel, I knew her before the season, and I knew that she was sickening. And first black trans woman on Drag Race was something to behold, really. I think we should celebrate that. And I really thought that she was going to dominate the season, and she did do really, really well, and she kind of represented herself very iconically, I would say. You know, we know exactly who Caramel is, which is exactly what you want when you go on Drag Race. I think people always say winning Drag Race doesn't necessarily mean winning it. So just because they didn't win doesn't mean they're not going to win the potential career success outside of Drag Race. But Ginger Johnson I had as third, and she obviously went on to win the season. I did pick up that she was talented, and I did think she was going to go far, but as the season went on, it was more and more clear that I had underestimated her, and she is a great winner. I think in that last episode, it was very clear that it was Michael versus Ginger. Tamara was really good the whole season, but I think there was just that one step above that Ginger Johnson and Michael were at in terms of the competition. And I think it was clear that it was going to be either of them. And I think the kind of show had set up the story that it was going to be either of them. And for me, up until that final episode, I really thought that it was going to be Michael. I was picking up the vibes that it was going to be Michael. And then it was in that last episode, as they started to focus on Ginger a little bit more, and they did that whole scene where Ginger figures out to be funny in the music video rather than be like sexy like the other two were. That's when I was like, oh, okay, I think she's going to win. And she did, and congrats to her because she's great. I wasn't a huge fan of her finale look. It is different and unique, and I do appreciate that. I think there's certain level of like of vavavoom that I really want from a finale look, but I do like the difference. I think Michael's look was really, really good. That's the kind of thing that I like and I look for, especially in a finale look. But what a great season, really. I think it definitely rivals UK season two for the best UK season. The UK season two is near perfect, and it honestly sits up in my top five, if not top three, drag race seasons of all time. In terms of my feelings on Ginger Johnson as a winner, I think it makes complete sense. And I think if we look at the previous winners, and maybe I'm overthinking this, but I do like to think of it like this way, where we've got the Vivian, Lawrence Chaney, Crystal Versace, Danny Beard, and Ginger Johnson. In each of their seasons, bar maybe the Vivian because she was the first, each of their seasons, they, as a winner, they offer something new and different to the brand, the Drag Race brand or the Drag Race UK brand. You know, Lawrence Chaney was this funny Scottish beloved, like very beloved and lovable queen. Crystal Versace was this young, fashion, very like polished queen. Then you've got Danny Beard, who's hilarious bearded queen with a unique take on makeup. And now we've got Ginger Johnson, who is kind of a comedy clown. And I feel like we haven't really had a winner that feels like a previous winner, which is great. And I'm not sure the US bit seasons have been able to kind of maintain that. But I do think at some stages, when you've got two queens in the finale and you can't pick between them, usually you can predict who the winner is going to be based on who offers the Drag Race brand that kind of difference. I think also it's a case of who needs that kind of stamp of approval for the fans. Fans can be ruthless. And I think in the case of Michael versus Ginger, Michael Marouli was already beloved, already successful outside of the show because of how much people were in love with him. But Ginger Johnson had done really, really well in the competition, and people weren't kind of so much flocking around her as much as they were Michael. So I think that kind of stamp of approval of being the winner will kind of elevate their kind of status within the fans, which I guess is a whole problem in itself, and maybe not a way to think about Drag Race because these are people, but you know, all of these things are considered in my head when I think of like, why did they pick that winner over any other? And especially when it's so close as Ginger and Michael was, because they were both 3 wins and both had kind of ramped up their success towards the end of the season. So it was kind of either of them were going to win. Tamara would have been a very lovable winner, a very funny winner. But I think when you've got 2 queens in the final 3 that are at 3 wins and have done so well to dominate the competition, crowning Tamara would have been a bit odd. You know, they've done it where a queen who has less wins over a queen who has more, but it's usually pretty close. You know, Jada and Gigi Good. Gigi had 4, Jada had 2 or 3, but Jada still was really, really good and definitely deserving of a winner, especially with those final lockdown lip syncs. So I think all of those things are taken into account. Some of my favorite moments of the season include the challenge where they were paired up in pairs, the one Kate Butch won, and Dee Dee and Tamara's version of Emmerdale, Femmerdale, I think it was called, was just so ridiculously funny. I think it looked like it was going to be bad, and in a way it kind of was, but it kind of worked. I think it was such a funny mess where we saw them not know their lines and kind of fumble through the challenge when filming with Michelle, and then produce this kind of ridiculous just scene. Obviously, Kate and Ginger was just so good. It was like professional. I think that challenge made sense to me for Caramel to go home. I think she fell into that trap that I think a lot of queens fall into, which is I think Michelle said it in the episode, to start from 100, which is always hard to take that anywhere. I think another season moment that I really enjoyed was the drama. I think the drama was really well balanced this season. I don't like a season where the drama feels to be the main thing, or you kind of feel like the queens don't like each other, or that it just feels uncomfortable. In Drag Race Philippines season 2, there were moments where it got a bit like that, where it felt uncomfortable. You're kind of shocked that stuff is being said and stuff is happening the way that it's happening. I think Drag Race UK season 5, there were good moments of like drama where you're kind of like, oh my god, the Banksy versus Vicky Vivacious Lamb to Slaughter and Caramel Lamb to Slaughter. I personally was on Banksy's side. I think they kind of brought up Banksy's name subtly, implied it was her fault on the main stage, and then played defensive when they were called out on what they'd done, saying, "Oh, I didn't say your name." It's like, well, you don't need to say my name, but for me to know what you're trying to get at. I think, you know, if when you do a challenge together, it's all about teamwork, and you can't blame somebody else for missing their line for you not getting yours. You know, I think another drama moment that was quite funny or entertaining was towards the end of the season when the queens all came back, and Vicky said to Dee that she thought she was sneaky. I quite like those moments of drama in the seasons because it's kind of after everyone's gone home, so it's not so much the pressure of the competition and people are like fighting and they're worried about going home, and it affects their position in the competition. Like someone's thinking about the drama and they go home because they can't focus. It's more so like a roundup where people get to say what they think. So I liked that. It was entertaining. But I think on the whole, the season was quite wholesome, which is nice. You know, there have been seasons where it's not as wholesome. There's been seasons where it's all wholesome, which can be kind of boring. I think it's a reality show, so part of it is the tension, part of it is the drama. You never want to see people fight, but there is got to be that sense of queens standing up for who they are. And when you stand up for who you are, a lot of the time you butt heads. I think one of my favourite moments of the season was the TicTac meetings that Michael, Tamara, and Ginger had. I think Michael's was really something, and this will be the connection that I make to being sober. This is how I will say something sober this episode, where he spoke about leaving his family because he was scared to come out. And I'm sure all queer people can relate to that feeling. But I think it's really hard to convey to people the absolute debilitating fear that is felt when you're contemplating coming out. It is a fear I have never, ever felt again or before that. And I really hope and don't even think I will, because I was so terrified to just say the words, standing in front of my parents' bedroom door, both feet, looking at my feet, telling them to take a step in, telling them to just go in and tell them. And I just couldn't. So I think Michael's story there of leaving home and feeling like he's lost out and lost time really hit home. And I think as part of my sobriety, one of the big things is thinking about and reconciling with all those things and all that trauma, that baggage, because for so long I had naively assumed that I'd gotten away with it. I'd gotten away unscathed. I'd dodged a bullet. The things had happened, but it hadn't affected me. I was almost proud, you know. And obviously I was wrong, and I was kidding myself. And so I have to reconcile with all of that. I have to process all of that as part of my journey and as part of recovery, as part of being sober. I think we all have our stories like Michael's, and it can be quite hard to come to the realization that it has affected us. It's almost like if it's affected us, that means it was real. And it being real is the scariest part of it happening. I think Ginger's TicTac meeting was a really sweet one to see because of his relationship. They brought out his partner, and it's just very wholesome. I also love Tamara and her mum. Their relationship is just so sweet to see. It's so hopeful to see a mother-son relationship where the mother knew from very early on and was encouraging. I think we've all seen those pictures of Tamara dressed up as Vicky Pollard, and I think it's wonderful that that is possible. I think gay people, queer people, at least when I was younger, I assumed the worst, as we all do, and I never even thought that something like that would be possible. And my upbringing was fine. My upbringing was good. It's just I had this idea of what would happen, and I had this idea of this great big bad, and it just wasn't true. For me, Drag Race has always been a comfort show, and I've seen every season like 3 times. I constantly rewatch seasons. I get just a desire, longing to watch a season. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go rewatch it now. I did UK season 2 not too long ago, and it is a great season. But Drag Race really, I guess, soppily, it really helped me come to terms with who I was because I was so uncomfortable with that. And that's why I stick with it. I have so many friends that have dropped out of watching Drag Race as they've gotten older. Maybe it has changed a bit. The show has evolved and it doesn't necessarily feel like the show it was before. So maybe that's why. But for me, I like the new queens that come in. I like to see the new things, the changes. There are so many great drag queens out there, and I love to see kind of the diversity, which is why I watch Dragula as well, because that's a side of Drag Race or a side of drag that doesn't get shown on Drag Race because it's spooky, it's kind of gross, and like that's the point, it's filthy. And that can't go on Drag Race because Drag Race is kind of a pageant with another element to it, which is like that comedy side of things. But overall, I love Drag Race and I probably always will. I likely will have another episode where I talk about Drag Race, probably quite soon, because the queens for season 16 have just been revealed. I've been watching all the Meet the Queens and all the promotional material. I'm probably going to pen down a predicted elimination order, although that's harder with 14 queens. So, yeah, I will probably do another episode about Drag Race season 16, the US seasons. I'm not sure if I'll do one before it airs or after it airs. If after it airs, it'll probably be like April next year. But I will be watching it and I probably will be enjoying it because these queens look great. Anyways, that is everything that I had planned to talk through about RuPaul's Drag Race UK Season 5. As I said before, Drag Race is a huge comfort show for me and has been since I was the age of 15. I've been watching it as it airs every season since then and been watching most of the international seasons, which maybe I'll touch on in another episode. But in sobriety, Drag Race has still remained, and it's kind of one of the few constants that has remained pre-sobriety and during sobriety. So it's still a huge comfort show for me, and it is kind of one of those things that allows me to link back to kind of my old self, I suppose. Sometimes I think there's this fear, at least there was for me, when starting sobriety that everything would change and that everything would be different. And at least with Drag Race and a few other things, but at least with Drag Race, it's been consistent. So thank you for listening. Drag Race UK Season 5 was great, and congratulations to Ginger Johnson. This has been Saying Something Sober, keeping me sober 172 days as of recording, episode 1.